Hi, it's Chris from Longship Gaming. Today we're talking about Mutant Genesis for Marvel Champions. The cycle is coming to an end with the release of Gambit and Rogue a couple of months ago. So I thought it was about time that I reviewed the 8 heroes from the cycle, similarly to how I did it for all the other heroes at the end of last year. So the level set, I've played all the heroes in different aspects on Solo Expert, but certainly not all combinations because no one has time for that. And I've taken some information for these ratings from the Marvel Champions database. So we have a 10-point scale over 5 categories with a maximum score of 50, rating the heroes from low to high. So we have fun factor, is the hero fun to play? Power level, how powerful is the hero's base cards, abilities, basics, etc. Theme, is the hero flavorful? Versatility, how many different aspects can be played effectively with the hero? And complexity, how easy or difficult is the hero to play? Tie breaks will be in the order of fun, power, theme, versatility, and complexity. At the end of the video, I'll go over my thoughts about Mutant Genesis, what really worked for me, what didn't work, and where I hope Marvel Champions is heading in the future. So we'll be right back with our rating of the 8 mutant characters from Mutant Genesis. Starting off with number 8, we have Cyclops. So, fun factor, giving him 5. Middle of the road, much like Cyclops himself as a character. He feels very much like a secondary character in his own books. Giving a power level of 5. Having access to the cream of the crop of X-Men allies is where his power really lies. Unfortunately, his own cards don't really excite. They don't really reflect the power of his optic blasts. Sort of just stands in the back and directs other people to do things. Which makes sense on theme, I suppose. He is a leader and a tactician, but very painfully dull as a hero. His signature cards are only his Visor and Phoenix as a signature ally. For versatility, I'm being generous here and saying that leadership is his correct home, but has some utility with protection, because protection just tends to be very good these days. Requires all the X-Men supports upgrades and is unlikely to stray away from using these cards. We'll get to more on that later in my final thoughts about Mutant Genesis, but he is a hero that is highly dependent on having all of the X-Men supports and upgrades that you can get your hands on. And, of course, all the really good allies that X-Men can field. So, for complexity, he's pretty easy to play. If you want to play all the possible best X-Men allies, of which there are many, as I said. The only complexity really is efficient tactic card placement, like Priority Target here. Which I think should have been a little more impactful, to be honest. I don't really find the investment worth it. So he gets a grand total of 28. Next up we have Rogue. Giving her a fun factor of 4, and this is because she feels like she was designed for multiplayer. As a solo player, I don't find her very fun to play. She is significantly hampered by that. I feel that the character's abilities are difficult to replicate in Marvel Champions. You really can't take some of the unique abilities from the villain or from I would even take the minions necessarily to keep their card text maybe for a turn or something like that. I think there's a real difficulty in bringing Rogue to the table to mimic accurately what she's capable of doing in the comics. And that really sort of lessens her power. And also, I don't really talk about Nemesis sets that much. I will more in these reviews. But I find that having Mystique show up again after she is so frequent in Mutant Genesis, that's kind of going back to the well too many times. It's pretty boring. Also, I find Mystique tends to be too overpowered in general. So for a power level of 5, certain cards are just duds when playing solo. So touched here, as we can see, you're never really going to be playing hero to gain stalwart, which is, I think, more valuable than getting aerial or retaliate or overkill. Just too situational. Doesn't really work. And then cards like Energy Transfer, a lot of work has to be done to basically get anything more out of this than, deal 2 damage to a character, heal 2 damage from Rogue, and ready her. The ready's fine, but you gain each of the attached characters' traits until the end of the round, which honestly is pretty much useless. Bulletproof Bell, however, is an amazing defensive card, probably one of the better ones in the game, but is again constrained on where touched has to go. On theme, while her thematic cards don't feel like they work, they're very much on theme. However, she only has 2 character-specific cards in Gambit and her jacket. Versatility, perhaps because her character cards feel so overwhelming. The other 25 cards had to pick up the slack, so she's pretty useful or at home with all the different aspects. You really have no choice. They have to be very strong aspects to make up for her lackluster power in her deck. Complexity, giving her a 5. She's middling difficulty, mostly because, much like Valkyrie, you have to be really careful where you're placing her touched card, like the problems that exist with Deathglow with Valkyrie. So managing where touch goes is really the difficult choice you have to make each turn. But you have to be very careful in the aspect you choose, and it really has to be suited to the scenario. She is not exactly a powerhouse character. So she comes in with a 29 in total. Next up, we have Phoenix. So I've given her a fun of 4. So playing Phoenix should feel like you're playing one of the most powerful Omega level mutants in the Marvel Universe. That, and of course coupled with the Phoenix Force. The problem is you're playing the entire game pretty much restrained. You don't want to really take the chance of becoming unleashed and having Dark Phoenix show up. And again, this is, I think, why the fun is so suppressed in Phoenix. If Dark Phoenix comes out, and it's very easy for Dark Phoenix to come out, there's three or 4 ways to do this, just playing normally. It's crippling. You'll end up playing against 2 villains at the same time, and it's not really worth the trade-off. Unleashed does not feel significantly more powerful to be able to deal with Dark Phoenix if she shows up. It ends up being a negative play experience, I find, when she shows up. There's nothing... A lot of the Nemesis minions throughout the game, they provide a challenge, they're thematic, they may put a roadblock up in front of you have to deal with, but it's not as absolutely crippling and dangerous as Dark Phoenix and the side scheme happens to be. I really think, design-wise, I know Phoenix is a very popular version of Jean Grey, but she really could have just been Marvel Girl. I'm giving her a power level of 4, and that's, as I mentioned, because you're going to be spending most of the game in Restrained and watching your counters on Restrained very, very closely. You do not want it to flip. Not even in late game. It's just, I think maybe in late game you can really go Unleashed, but at that point, if you're already winning, why risk it? So she ends up feeling no more powerful than an average hero. Mind Control is overcosted as a one-off 4, attached to a non-elite, so that just wipes out many. And it's interesting here because Sabretooth, I believe, I'm not. He should be an elite. He's the villain after all, so this card doesn't really make a lot of sense. If the rest of the Brotherhood are elites, then Sabretooth is going to be one too. But taking control of an attached minion and treating it as a controlled ally with a blank text box, that's the problem. It's almost useless. Unless you get something, Magical Christmas Land sort of situations where you have an extremely high health or high damage minion, I just don't feel that it's worth it. Playing Rise from the Ashes feels like it's just delaying an inevitable loss at the hands of Dark Phoenix. So yes, you can come back from nearly being defeated, but that means that you become unleashed, and oh boy, Dark Phoenix will show up almost guaranteed once you do that. So, conversely though, her theme should be a 10. Her entire character deck is pure theme while sacrificing power. Her nemesis is horrible, but it fits. Versatility 8. Much like Rogue, her core cards are weak enough that the remaining 25 have to carry a lot of her utility. No matter which aspect, they really have to pick up the slack, and you have to be careful, again, choosing your aspect to take on specific scenarios. There's no one catch-all aspect. Covered versatility already. For complexity, giving her a 4. Harder than your average hero because you're playing with one hand tied behind your back due to the threat of Unleashed. If Dark Phoenix comes out, you may as well scoop, because essentially facing two villains and an unremovable game-ending side scheme are a negative player experience. So I'm giving her a 30 in total. You'd think, well, my negatives, she should be at the bottom, but I think really the thematic nature of the character really shines through, and I think that elevates her over her peers. But still, not a character I'm looking forward to play very often. All right, next up, Storm. So I'm giving her a fun factor of 6. I'm not saying that Storm is unfun, but I don't feel there was anything really stood out when playing her. Maybe because she's a kind of form changer. I'm not sort of a form changer. I'm not really a big fan of form changers in general. But I've played her a few times, and honestly, I don't remember much about when playing those games. They really didn't stand out to me. Power 6. I said in one of my previous videos about scenarios and modulars that there needs to be more environment type cards that affect the battlefield. And in this case, Storm brings her own. While their special effects can be powerful, they do have a downside that may affect a player as well. She feels very balanced, though, with a slight tip of the scales in favor of the player. Also, what I don't understand is why she doesn't have innate aerial. This is a thing with a lot of characters. They just naturally can fly, and I don't understand. Like, she hasn't always had the cape as her over the history of the character. So I'm not entirely sure why she needs to have the cape to be able to get aerial. She should just have it all the time. I mean, she's a weather god, so that seems strange to be so dependent on a piece of equipment. Thematically, she has an 8. She's a weather goddess, and her weather deck alone makes her thematically unique. And it's odd, though, that she has no signature ally, but at least she has her garden, I suppose. Versatility, giving her a 6. Protection and leadership are very solid with Storm. She's pretty self-sufficient, but probably needs help managing threats through allies. Complexity of 5, the biggest challenge is managing which weather environment to have out. So again, it comes back to the idea of form changers are always a little more challenging, at least in my experience. But at least Storm allows you to quickly switch between them with very little cost using weather control and her weather goddess cards. Moving on to number 4, we have Wolverine. So I'm giving a fun rating of 6. Wolverine doesn't get enough opportunities to do what he does best, I find, which is attack. Sacrificing hit points to play cards is fine, but I never felt when playing Wolverine that he ever really had an opportunity to let loose. So maybe this is just the times I've played Wolverine. I don't find that he is as strong and iconic as he should be. Maybe I've just had bad luck with him. Maybe it's the scenarios I picked for him to go against. There's just some block I have when playing with him. So I'm giving him a power level of 5. Very middle of the road, power-wise, largely due to how expensive his attack cards are. And he's very reliant on aspect cards to carry him. I honestly feel that Track by Scent and Jubilee are the strongest cards in his deck, other than his attack cards, because they are just, I find, very expensive, both health-wise and cost-wise. As I said, I personally haven't had, the caveat is I haven't had much luck with him, and maybe that's, again, because of the matchups I put him through. Theme of 10, he's all in on attacks, and his support upgrade cards are very much on theme. No cards seem out of place whatsoever with him. A solid 10. It feels like Wolverine. I just wish that I was able to play him better. Versatility, I'm giving him a 4. Protection and aggression are the best aspects for Wolverine. Protection allows Wolverine the space he needs to pop off on the villain. And aggression laser focuses attacks. Mind you, that's against certain villains and not all. Both have access to solid stun effects, which allows him to run solo more effectively. Complexity 8, he's very easy to play. Against the right villain using his preferred aspects, there aren't a lot of hard decisions for the player to make on their turn. But I do find that he can get caught out pretty quickly. So I'm giving you a total of 33. Next up, we have Shadowcat. I'm giving her a 7 as a fun rating. A form changer rated this high for me? Well, yes. Her phase shifting is so fast and so satisfying, the villain feels completely neutered if you set up your defenses correctly. A power level 8, she has the perfect 2/2/2 stat line, and a suite of cards that can really mess with the goals of the scenario. It's easy for her to be in the right form to get the most out of her cards' special abilities. In fact, I think she only really has one dead card, and that's in acute control, even though it's a useful corner case. On theme, 10. Entirely on point. She's got Lockheed for one thing, which is fantastic. Her room and her extreme agility to shift between forms. There are a lot of heroes in Marvel Champions that I find just feel right to play. Shadowcat, the design of Kitty Pryde, Shadowcat is, I feel, almost perfect. I don't find that, with the exception of one maybe dead card, everything else works for her fantastically. For her versatility, I'm giving her a 4. Her core cards are very powerful, so she can probably play every aspect comfortably, but protection and aggression really take her power to 11. She is not to be messed with. It helps that she was always one of my favorite X-Men characters, so maybe there's some bias here. I don't know. Complexity of 4. So this may be controversial, but I feel that Shadowcat is a little more complex character to play than a lot of the X-Men. You need to pay close attention to her phased and solid states because of the forced response. And the difference between forced response and response. You really need to think about which state you want to end your player phase in. Depending on the state of the board. So I find her, complex, but it's not, she is more complex, but I think it's a very rewarding complexity. So she comes in at a total of 33. Next up, we have another one of my favorite X-Men characters of all time, and that's Colossus. Giving him a 7 for fun. Finally, a hero that can truly take a hit. Time and time again. Innate Tough is fantastic, and his cards play off the status card in a unique way. Giving him a power of 7. Colossus can freely trade tough cards for added benefits, get them back very easily. Has lots of cards that can restore them. He's also free to spend time in Alter Ego and alternate an overall X-Men trend. There's a lot more switching back and forth in Mutant Genesis. And with a 0-cost card, with Armor Up, he can just switch back as needed, replace as tough when needed. Organic Steel plays very well with other cards, like his thwart. I can't remember the name of the card right now, but his thwart upgrade that allows you to draw a card when you have to use the tough, and that also combines with other cards that you can, discard a tough card to get 2 tough cards. So even though he has a low hand size, which is usually pretty crippling, a hand size of 4, I don't feel it with him in the way that I feel it with other characters. He just has a lot of ways to get more cards fairly easily. And again, you're going to be switching down to his alter ego form quite a lot, so it's not as debilitating. Hit points 14, very good too. One of the highest health characters in the game. He is on theme wise, giving him an 8. He's a sensitive guy in a big organic steel body, so he's got his studio, he's got Kitty, and his event cards exemplify his protective status. Giving him a versatility of 6, protection, aggression, and to make up for his weak threat mitigation, justice. As good as he is, he needs a lot of support that needs to be correctly tailored to the scenario that he's facing. Complexity 7, I found him very easy to play, frequently flicking between hero and alter ego, which is absolutely necessary to maintain his tough cards. Not having to exhaust to defend and having 14 hit points allows Colossus to get the most out of every player phase. So he gets a 35 in total. And coming in at number 1, and this shocked me, is Gambit. So just to preface this one, amongst my friend group, Gambit's always sort of a joke. He always, never a character I really liked in X-Men, let's just put it that way. But my goodness, he is fantastic in Marvel Champions. So he's gets a fun rating of 8. He's so good. He's been completely redeemed in my eyes. A lot of it's tied to his power level, so I'm giving him an 8. Counter-based heroes are by and large very powerful. The fact that he can bank them easily and unleash them as needed in the late game. He has a double resource card with an upside, a signature ally that can come out for free almost all the time, and she has tough. She's unbelievable. I like her better as an ally than as a character. And Creole Charmer may very well be the best card in Marvel Champions today. It's of course it's tied to Gambit, but my goodness, being able to have an alter ego action to thwart 3 threat from a scheme if it removes it, confuse the villain, unbelievably powerful, and very easy to pull off. It's just there. I think there's 3 of them in the deck, and it's not very hard to pull off. So, just a fantastic card and core to how he functions. So on theme, I'm giving him a 10. He's got the tools, he's got the charm, and the correct ally. His cards absolutely reflect his capabilities as a master thief. So versatility-wise, leadership is the only aspect that Gambit doesn't really need due to how strong his 25 core cards are. So why is this an 8? Well, I played Gambit as an all-basic deck using the cream of the crop X-Men themed cards. There are so many great X-Men basic cards. Supports, allies, and upgrades. Can be wildly successful just with an all-basic deck. I think one of the few characters I've ever played that can manage that quite handily. Complexity, I'll give him a 7. He's as easy to run as he is powerful. He's likely to have an answer to every problem every turn, so you don't have to make a lot of tough choices. So he comes in with a total of 41. So at this point in the year, I rate Gambit in the number 2 spot of all released heroes so far. I'm absolutely gobsmacked by this. I just would never have believed that he would be so high on the list. So let's see if he's able to maintain it until I do my end of year review of all the heroes to see who's gotten better and who's gotten worse over the years. But a very strong showing for the Cajun here. Okay, so some final thoughts. Mutant Genesis overall has been a great cycle. You get a full suite of thematic and impactful supports and upgrades. So X-Jet, X-Mansion, Utopia, and Moira. Some of the best allies introduced in a long time. And not only usable in X-Men, but some aspect staples going forward. Does not heavily punish flipping to alter ego and often encourages it as a part of the hero's core abilities. And an X-Men fan would quite easily just invest in the core set and the Mutant Genesis cycle and be very happy with this game for a long time. I also like the fact that they did X-Men themed reprints of a lot of core cards. And Phase, I know people don't like to have duplicates, but it really has to happen in the product cycles because not everybody is going to buy everything. I'd actually like to see more of this going forward with each cycle. So I know that we're going to be in an X cycle for a while here, but when we move on to other aspects of the Marvel Universe, it'll be fantastic where we end up with more of the thematic new art on some of the cards to switch it up some. So the cons are, and I'm going to go back a page here, even though these are all very strong cards, I found that it's a bit of a walled garden. There are very few interactions, enhancements with established archetypes, so shield or repurpose protection, for example. The X-Men keep the best supports and upgrades for themselves. One con I have is I don't quite understand why they're not always mutants. I mean, that's core to their identity, so we're just going to go back to Gambit here. On his identity card. So they're always mutants on their alter ego side, but they are never mutants on their hero side, which makes no sense. It's it's called Mutant Genesis. They are mutants. I don't know why they don't have that keyword on that side. Maybe it's a balance issue with the upgrades and supports. I really don't know. I got a bit of a thematic quibble here. I know they're focused on the 90s version of the X-Men because that's probably the best known for a lot of people, the most easily recognized version of the X-Men. And there will be the X-Men 97 cartoon coming out on Disney Plus in the future. But I really think there's a missed opportunity here to modernize them and bring them into the modern X-Men Krakoa era. The look of the characters, how they've changed. So as I mentioned earlier about Phoenix, I think she could have been Jean Grey. I don't know if they needed to necessarily go to that well. It makes for a very interesting setting. The problem is, of course, that there are a lot of villains in the Krakoan era that are no longer villains, that are allies. So how do you make Magneto, who is one of the core, at least last one when I was last reading the Krakoa era House of X stuff, how do you make Magneto a villain when he's so usually identified as such, when he's actually one of the founding members of the Quiet Council? So who knows? I get it. It's just I think it was a missed opportunity. So my final thoughts on X-Men are on the Mutant Genesis cycle. It was a very strong, a very fun cycle to play through. It followed on from the truly excellent Sinister Motives Web Warriors Champion cycle. I really hope this trend continues from what we've seen of Next Evolution with X-Force. Hopefully that trend continues. That it's also as strong thematically as this one was. The Mutant Genesis heroes will be slotted into the overall hero rankings at the end of 2023, which I'm sure are going to shake things up quite a bit. And who knows, my opinion may change by the end of the year with access to more possibly X-Men cards or X-themed cards in X-Force. And I'd love to hear what you think for this cycle. What were your highlights? Who are your favorites? Where would you like to see things go in the future? And I think this has been a very successful cycle, and people who are just getting into the game, you could buy, as I said, buy the core set, buy the Mutant Genesis cycle, and you'll be very happy for a long time. You won't really be missing out on too much from outside of it. So that's it for now, and until next time, happy gaming. Thank you so much for watching Longship Gaming. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It will really help the channel to grow and improve. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when more Longship Gaming content goes live. Until next time, happy gaming.